BM Bear says illiterate or marginally literate adults. These low literacy and retention rates have wide ranging consequences. Philadelphia ranks 92nd out of the 100 largest U.S. cities in educational attainment. 17.4% adult Philadelphians, an estimated 225,000, do not have a high school diploma, compared to 10.5% in Pennsylvania at large, and only 28% of Philadelphians 25 and older have a bachelor's degree or higher, ahead of only Cleveland and Detroit, and 6% behind the national average. The literacy crisis in Philadelphia's public schools produces adults who struggle to read. Philadelphia ranks at the bottom among large American cities in reading proficiency. According to recent federal data, roughly 22% of Philadelphians aged 16 and older lack the most basic literacy skills. 52% of Philadelphian adults are functionally illiterate.
From Every Man a Wildcat, Philadelphia is so miserable they filmed the majority of It's Always Sunny in Philadelphia episodes as far away from it as they could.
Scott Moore says Eagles fans booed Santa Claus and Michael Irvin laying unconscious on the green slab of concrete they call the field. Their baseball mascot, the Fanatic, is a green, I don't know what.
Big Hat Chiefs guy, the butt shove boys are always the second or third comment on any Chiefs or Mahomes tweet. They were absolutely devastated from losing Super Bowl 57 and are overcompensating with their Super Bowl 59 win.
Chief Justin O. Kaka says, I started looking up best Philadelphia burns, and AI assumed I was talking about fans lighting the city on fire after their Super Bowl win. He also says, one of the most memorable things about Philly is a show that takes place in Bel Air. And finally, the city has so few sports icons that they build statues for fictional boxers.
Oof. Woof. JLW says they're just not the same without Glenn Fry, and Vince Gill should have stuck to country. Oh, yeah, we're talking about the band now, not the team. Welcome in to It's Always Sunny in Chiefs Kingdom. I'm Austin. Find me on X. I'm calling it X now because, let's face it, Twitter is dead. I saw somebody say the other day that Jesus would have been a Nazi, and so, that was when I decided I got to start calling this X instead of Twitter. At Real Bird Lawyer on Blue Sky, at Bird Law Expert. Here with me as always when we're podcasting, which we are again, my co-host Taylor at Taylor_Wit on X, and IASIC. IASICK. That's It's Always Sunny in Chiefs Kingdom on Blue Sky. What is going on, my friend?
It's great to be back with you, buddy. We've obviously kept in close contact in these last several weeks and months that we haven't been doing the show, but it's time to get back at it. Time to get after it and talk about the Chiefs.
As the Chiefs are scraping the rust off and are in training camp this week, so too are we, shaking the rust off and getting back behind the microphone. And to kick it off, we just have a pretty much welcome back, shake the rust off. The teams out there, they're doing the 7-on-7s. They're doing the 1-on-1 drills on the side. They're doing some light work. The offense is getting out there. The defense is getting out there. But they're not out there, hitting each other as hard as they can. They're not doing fully padded practices. This is not that kind of show. We're going to get some light work in here just to get us warmed back up, just to, work ourselves back into shape, shed some of the offseason pounds, get into the best shapes of our lives, and continue to bring great Chiefs podcast content every week for the rest of the season, or at least that's the plan. So we do have a great episode. All that being said, we have news, and we're going to talk about some offseason transactions since we took a little break from the podcast for various reasons related to and unrelated to football. So we're going to hit those two main topics and, call it a day, hit the showers early.
It's time to get back into the swing of things. We're not going to go too crazy, but it's good to get an episode under the belt.
Let's hit. All right, to kick this off, we got to talk about Rashee Rice. This was something that sort of came out of left field just a couple of weeks ago. Rashee Rice, we had heard kind of all offseason that, we don't know when the legal proceedings are going to get resolved. This obviously being his criminal reckless driving case involving the incident that happened in Dallas earlier this offseason. And he pleads guilty kind of out of the blue, receives a 5-year probationary sentence with 30 days in jail. I'm just going to run through this, and you can comment at the end if you have any questions for the resident lawyer on this podcast of the two of
Sure.
us. So he is going to be supervised by probation, but what he actually has is what's called a deferred sentence or a suspended sentence. What this means is, even though he's pled guilty to a felony, he hasn't been sentenced for a felony. Now, you might be asking, if he hasn't been sentenced, so what's 30 days in jail? Well, he's doing 30 days in jail as a condition of his supervision, not as a sentence. So the way that that works is if I agree to supervision, probation, or a deferred sentence, I can make you do certain things. I can make you do community service. I can make you pay back restitution. And a lot of times, you can add jail, a certain amount of jail, as a condition of probation. So what that means is, in order to fulfill the terms of his supervision, he has to spend 30 days in jail. It sounds like that's going to be probably served in chunks, broken up. I'm sure they're working on,
15
you know,
weekends.
yeah, it could be 15 weekends. It could be 30 single days, like when you've got the means to travel and the money to travel, although after the civil case, who knows how much money
Yeah.
Richie's going to have left in the bank after paying his lawyers for getting this sweet
Ugh.
deal. Um, the point is, it's not going to affect anything that he's doing professionally. The 30 days of jail is going to be served at a time and date mutually agreeable to the parties. And so they'll be able to work that out. So he's serving that probably in the offseason or over the next couple of off seasons. This 5-year term of supervision, that means that he is going to be potentially supervised for 5 years, although it's very common for these types of agreements to result in early termination. Once somebody has done all of the conditions of their supervision, it's very common for them to come to the court and to the prosecutor and say, well, I did everything you wanted me to do. Do I really have to just check in with my probation officer every month for the next 2 years? And nobody really wants that. The DAs usually don't want it. The probation officers certainly don't want it. They don't have time
No.
for that. And of course, Rashi's not going to want to do that. So I think it's very likely that he'll be able to get early termination from this, provided that he gets everything done that he needs to get done. And if he does everything he's supposed to do, the glorious part of a deferred sentence is that if he does everything he's supposed to do, the case goes off of the record. This actually is what happened with just a throwback to Tyreek Hill when he was in college. He also received a
Mm.
deferred sentence, which is why Tyreek Hill never had a conviction for the incident involving his girlfriend in college. It's because he too got a deferred sentence and he was able to complete that. And so, even though Rashi's pled guilty to a felony, that's not going to go on his record unless he screws up on his supervision and he doesn't get done what he needs to get done. If he gets a new crime, for example, that would violate his probation. And then if that were to be the case, then the DA could go to the court and say, well, this guy, committed a new crime or something like that. We're going to revoke his deferred sentence. And then the felony conviction would enter into his record. None of this has anything to do with the NFL's disciplinary policy. And we're going to see what discipline the NFL imposes. It sounds like it could be as few as 1 or 2 games. It could be as many as 6 games. It's probably going to fall somewhere in that range. It seems pretty unlikely that it's going to be more than 6. And, we can joke about Roger hating the Chiefs and, slapping Rasheed with a 12-game suspension. But the NFL really painted themselves into a corner when they gave, serial rapist Deshaun Watson an 11-game suspension, because that was like the worst thing someone could possibly do and still play in the NFL, right? Like if you murder somebody, you're going to be in prison. So it's not, so this is really the worst thing that somebody could feasibly do and remain in the NFL. And he got an 11-game suspension for that. So that kind of caps the upper end of what they could reasonably suspend Rasheed for. I do think that, hopefully it'll just be a couple of games. And, by all accounts, he's handled this situation well. He's already done a lot of community service. There was an article in the Kansas City Star last week that he hasn't paid the victims yet in connection with the civil judgment. So we'll see how that develops. But that doesn't have anything to do with his criminal case. So
If
he'll
I
take care of
remember,
all this, and
that charge in the civil one was pretty hefty. I mean, look,
oh, sure.
he's on his rookie deal. I understand that he's an NFL player, but with all the different, the ways that the money gets tied up and the agents and he gets game checks, it's not like they just cut him a check for millions of dollars right up front. I mean, I think it's perfectly understandable if he doesn't have whatever it was, 100,000 or a million. It was some kind of round, large number like that that he was supposed to pay. And yeah, I saw that article as well. Didn't Kareem get, was it 11 games also, or eight, or maybe it was half season, maybe it was eight. I
I
feel
think it was
like,
eight.
and
I think it
that
was
was
eight.
like, you know, I mean that I don't know. The comparing, it's crazy. I was thinking about Deshaun with 11 and then Kareem with eight. I mean
Hmm.
that's a
Kareem Kareem
wide
was
gap.
never charged for that, by the way.
No, no, he
He
wasn't.
actually he was never even criminally charged for that incident, and he
But
got an
TMZ
eight
did
game
say he
suspension.
brutally kicked
Yes, he
her,
did.
and
Yes,
and
yes,
that's enough.
yes. The framing is always important, but then again, Tyreek Hill had a
Yeah.
recording of him saying, "You should be afraid of me too, bitch," which
Jesus.
played on national television during the NFL draft, and
I
he didn't
remember.
get suspended at all. So,
Yeah.
you know, it would be easy to say optics drive disciplinary policy in the NFL, except
It
Tyreek
does.
Hill was horrible optics, and he didn't get suspended. So
Nothing drives the disciplinary
nothing
policy
drives
in the
it.
NFL.
It's completely arbitrary, and there's no transparency at all. And so we'll see. Rasheed might never play in the NFL again, but
Yeah.
hopefully he will be out there with the Chiefs at least pretty early on in the season and be able to be a contributor this year. The good news is he's healthy, and I'm sure they'll work it out so that whatever the suspension is, I'm sure that the Chiefs are trying to get some clarity on what that will be before the season kicks off.
Yeah, you don't think it would be like come down late in the year, right? Like that would be the worst case scenario, is if they give him the last 6 games or something. I
Yeah,
mean,
yeah,
ugh.
exactly. It doesn't seem like there's any need for. I mean, this has been going on for what now, a year and a half, because it
Yeah,
was
it was
last
March of
off season,
24. Mm-hmm.
right? So the NFL has had 16 months to investigate, 17 months to investigate this, and it's not, or I can't do math. Yep,
16.
and
You
whatever.
nailed it the
It
first
doesn't
time.
matter.
Yep, yep.
Okay, 16. I shouldn't have second guessed myself.
Uh-uh.
The point is, there's not a lot to this, right? Like it's on video.
Mm-hmm.
He admitted that he was driving. There's not a lot to investigate.
No.
So again, setting aside the fact that the NFL's disciplinary process is entirely opaque and
Yeah, maybe the
seemingly
Ouija board
arbitrary.
just isn't responding to them right
Sure.
now on
Yeah.
what so they have to wait until they get a clear answer. The 8 ball has said shake again later.
They're waiting to see if Rasheed is in the Epstein files. And they're waiting for the news drop. When that list finally gets released, they're going to say, "All right, okay, yeah, he can serve 2 games in November, whatever." In other offseason news, big trade: Chiefs kick left guard Joe Tooney to the Bears. This one was, I don't want to say surprising, because obviously Joe was getting up there in age. He had a very expensive contract. The Chiefs, as we will talk about, had some of their own homegrown players, including another guard that they wanted to pay top of market extensions to. But this was certainly a blow to the team we talked about at the end of last season. And obviously we saw how it played out in the Super Bowl, not well. But, we talked about Joe Tooney solidifying himself potentially as the greatest left guard in NFL history. If he had gone to and won a Super Bowl, kicking out and playing left tackle as a career guard, what a boon that would be for his legacy. And, the result of the Super Bowl tarnishes that a little bit. But how are you feeling about Joe Tooney's exit to the Chicago Bears?
The result of the Super Bowl. What Super Bowl? I
Oh,
don't
that's
I don't
great.
recall what you're talking about. However, um, yeah, I mean this was basically, I think most people kind of broke this down as the Chiefs chose between Trey Smith and Joe Tooney. And
Sure.
you obviously could not have the two highest paid guards in the NFL on your line that already has the highest paid center in the NFL. Just not economically feasible. And the Chiefs had a lot of mouths to feed this offseason. They're still, we'll talk about kind of Trent McDuffie and if that's possible to get done anytime soon. But I mean, the economics just weren't really going to work. And they traded him for a fourth rounder in next year's draft, which is not really a significant return, but it's not nothing either. It's not a seventh rounder. They didn't cut him. They didn't. I mean, they at least got some value back for him. They traded him to the NFC, to a team that does not really threaten their standing in the NFL by any means. I love Joe Tooney. I think he was one of the best offensive linemen in a franchise that's had many great offensive linemen
Yeah.
in the course of the years for Kansas City, but it was time. He was a little bit older. If the Chiefs had chosen Joe Tooney over Trey Smith, I do think that there would have been some questioning just based on his age. And, it's hard to play high level in the NFL into your 30s. I mean, that's just hard to do for anybody. And so they had to make the hard choice. I wish him all the best. I think that the deal kind of worked out for everybody involved. It certainly is one of the best free agent signings in Chiefs history. He was an unbelievable monster in the 4 years he was here. So, hats off to him.
Yeah, absolutely. And I mean, adding 2 Super Bowl rings to his chest of rings that he accrued with the Patriots before he came over as a free agent with the Chiefs. And the Chiefs trade him to a former Chief, Brian
Yeah,
Poles, the GM there.
good point.
So it should be an organization that has some familiarity in terms of what he's walking into. I know, Ryan Poles obviously took some members of the Chiefs front office with him, and I'm sure they're going to build up the coaching staff there. There's going to be some Kansas City ties there, so hopefully Joe will feel right at home, and he's going to a team with, let's not forget the number 1 overall pick from last year, Caleb Williams. So it will be really interesting to see how that team plays out, and obviously top-notch new coach coming over from Detroit, Ben Johnson. I mean, I'm really excited, actually, which feels weird to say about the Chicago Bears, who have
Sure.
never had a 4,000-yard passer in the entire history of their franchise, and haven't won a Super Bowl since the '85 Bears. I'm actually pretty interested to see how this Bears team plays out, and wish Joe all the best. So, speaking of the 2 homegrown guys that the Chiefs needed to pay and needed to clear Joe Tooney's salary in order to be able to pay Trey Smith and George Karlaftis, both get 4-year extensions here in the last week. I don't think either of these were a huge surprise. We knew the Chiefs were likely to pay Trey Smith, and while George Karlaftis was maybe a little bit more surprising in that there wasn't quite as much buzz around it for as long as there was for Trey Smith. Both of these guys are really good players who you would want the Chiefs to re-sign, and you would want them to be Chiefs for life. And 2 very different stories. Obviously, Trey Smith, a very highly regarded college prospect who everybody knew could play ball, but people were really scared of medically and really worried that he wasn't going to be able to be healthy enough with his heart condition to be able to compete in the NFL and have the success that he's had. And then George Karlaftis, I mean, a first-round pick, along with Trent McDuffie in that huge franchise-changing draft, 3 years ago. Both of these guys have been really solid, really at times spectacular players for the Chiefs. Obviously, Karlaftis took over that playoff game with the 3 sacks just in this last playoff run. Trey Smith has developed into one of the best guards in the league. Were you surprised by either of these, or surprised by the money on either of these contract extensions?
I think the Karlaftis extension gets a little bit of sticker shock at first, until they dropped the important distinction that he does still keep the 4th and 5th years on his deal in place
Right.
before the 4-year extension. So what it really works out to is 6 years and 105 million left on his contract, which is 17 and a half AAV, which is perfectly reasonable. I mean, that's, it's not a his production is interesting because he busts his ass and he's always around the play, but he doesn't show up in the box score as much as someone that you would want to pay an elite amount of money, but they didn't pay an elite amount of money, so that works out. That's great. He's a really good cog on the defensive line. You needed to solidify some guys on that line that have kind of been there and done that. And so his money at first, I think it was the 88 number when they first dropped the 4-year extension, where I was like, oh, that's a bit steep for Karlaftis, but then it stretches out and it makes a lot of sense. Trey Smith was exactly where 23 and a half AAVs, 4 years, 94 million. That is right on line. I think SpotRack even had that as the projected extension for him before he signed that. So like
Hmm.
nothing, nothing out of the ordinary there. I did think that once they traded Tooney, that they were going to lock up Smith long term. That makes sense. It would be crazy to get rid of both of them or to not be able to retain Trey Smith and let him walk or anything like that. So yeah, both these deals were pretty boilerplate, but that's what when you're building championships, you just you take the singles when they come and you make sure that you do the right transit. You don't get yourself into a situation where your first round draft pick and your star edge rusher are both holding out coming into training camp, like certain other franchise. So
Would
you know,
be AFC contenders.
yeah, exactly. Except they haven't contended in 4 years. They're but either way, it was good. It was good move to get both those guys locked up. Loved it.
I'm a little bit not surprised that the Chiefs decided to retain Terry Smith, but obviously there is a big gap between getting the production you were getting for the salary of a sixth round pick on a rookie contract versus
Yeah.
paying the highest paid, making him the highest paid right guard in the league. And so obviously there's a big gap there. Now, as we'll discuss when we get into training camp hype, the Chiefs did just draft a rookie left tackle in the first round in Josh Simmons. And so, if you're going to have top of the market deals at center and right guard, maybe you can find some savings in other spots along the offensive line. And,
You better.
exactly. And the way that the timeline of this contract works is, obviously, any deal in the NFL is really realistically like a 2 or 3 year deal.
Mm-hmm.
And by the time the Chiefs are ready to pay Josh Simmons, and we all hope that they will want to pay Josh Simmons, this contract that they've given to Trey Smith will not be an obstacle to that when the time comes to pay Josh Simmons. So
no.
It's not surprising. And it is, a part of the offensive line that you want to have continuity in. Obviously, this is the second time in Mahomes' career that the Chiefs have had a really tough offensive line showing in a postseason game. And, both times the Chiefs have reacted very strongly to that. And, the first time it had great results. The Chiefs bounced back and, within 3 years had won back-to-back Super Bowls after they revamped the offensive line following the Tampa Super Bowl. And we can only hope that this revamp will be as successful. Speaking of Super Bowls and the Chiefs, we bid happy trails to a former Chief, the Honey Badger Tyrann Mathieu, retiring from the NFL at age 33. Not a huge shock. I actually was surprised at how surprised people were by this.
Yeah,
I mean,
I think that's a good way to put it.
33 is old
Yep.
for an NFL player,
Yep.
especially one that's taken as much punishment as Tyrann has. A guy that is not huge and has, when he wants to, hit people very hard. Played the last couple of seasons after leaving the Chiefs down in New Orleans, which honestly is probably not a very fun experience. I know that's where he's from, but like on the field, being a part of that organization, they've been through a couple of head coaches. They have not had a lot of success on the field. I'm not really that surprised that Tyrann decided to hang it up, and I was surprised that people were surprised by it, if that makes sense.
It does. And I was similarly, when he announced his retirement, I was like, yeah, that makes sense. And then I read all of these like, oh, wow. And I was like, not really.
Yeah,
and also, the Saints are such a disaster right now, especially, Derek Carr walked away from football instead of playing for the Saints. I think they've had two other guys also retire in this offseason before Matthew. I think he was their fourth retirement. And like, he went back to home in Louisiana. He probably decided like, oh, I should just use all my millions of dollars and hang out at home. And like, I don't need to play in the NFL anymore. I wonder if he had, gone and signed with the Rams or someone like that, if he had, been away from his home still on a successful franchise, if he might still be kind of chasing the dream. But he was like, oh, so football kind of sucks now. It's cool to be a millionaire. It's cool to be at home. I'm good. I'm going to walk away. I think that was perfectly reasonable by him. Happy trails for sure. I know, the ending was a little weird with the Twitter stuff. And I think a lot of people, he said the Chiefs were the most toxic fan base in sports. He was emotional. We were emotional. I think everybody was kind of ready to break up, like him and the Chiefs.
Yeah.
But at the end of the day, when you look back on it, he's a champ. He brought the championship swagger back to the Chiefs. And I mean, I'll forever be grateful that the Chiefs decided to bring him as one of their big money free agent moves in the Andy Reid era. I mean, he's one of the biggest decisions they ever made, and it was nothing but good. It worked out really well.
Yeah, it was hugely successful, a hugely successful free agent signing. It's funny that you mentioned Tyrann's online presence because I do remember we were doing the podcast.
Sure.
Tyrann followed me on Twitter for a while, for probably about 7 or 8 months, and I think he maybe popped that follow during the offseason. And then once we got into about week 3
Yeah.
of his last season with the Chiefs, I was inevitably,
You were yourself
you
on
guys,
Twitter
you guys know that my social media presence during games is extremely toxic, sometimes by design and other times just
by
because
necessity.
that's how I'm feeling. Exactly right. So he popped that unfollow button pretty quick, but he's a controversial and yeah,
Dude, he's hilarious.
he's a controversial figure in the history of the NFL and in the history of the Chiefs, but he is hilarious. And I honestly like, you know, I with the exception of the short period of time in there where his presence was. Do you remember when he rage quit Madden against Tyreek?
Oh, I had forgotten about that, but
Oh my
yes,
God,
of course.
Tyreek beat him like 50-0, and
Of
he rage
course.
quit, and he was like, we thought he was basically like, I mean, borderline threatening Tyreek's life on
Yeah.
Twitter.
Yeah, he's so
Behind the scenes,
bad.
like
Thank you for reminding me of this.
he is. It just came to me while we were talking. I mean, he was wild. He brought the chaotic energy that when it's going well you really love to have, and when it's not going well you really fear for the safety of the player and the other players in the locker room,
Yes. Yes.
and frankly anyone involved in the whole operation, the fans seeing him in the stadium, you just never really knew what was going to happen with Tyrann Mathieu, and most of the time that was a fun quality to enjoy as fans.
That's fair. That's definitely fair.
Well, let's wrap up this news segment with training camp. We mentioned the Chiefs are back in St. Joe, kicking off the dust, the rust, whatever, dust, rust, etc. It's actually kind of funny that both of those are acceptable
Yeah.
terms,
Yeah.
dust, rust. They're kicking off the dust and the rust in St. Joseph at training camp. We're 2 days in as we sit here recording this, and I thought it would be fun for us to just kind of go through some of the early training camp hype stories. Now, if you have any that jump out on the defensive side, feel free to pop in. But I was going through making my list here, and I only came up with guys on the offensive side of the ball.
People have been covering it very well. I haven't really seen a defensive like standout. Now, guys have made good plays, but I think we can stick with with the guys that we've noted so far.
Let's start with Josh Simmons. We mentioned him, obviously the Chiefs' first-round pick from this last year, who before his injury was widely regarded as the best tackle prospect in this class. I mean, it's been 2 days, but like he looks the part so far. Everybody's been very impressed with him. Andy Reid is not going to be effusive about rookie players, but what you what you have to take with Andy is not what he's saying at the podium, but who he's giving playing time to.
Mm-hmm.
And we saw it when Creed Humphrey came out, and Trey Smith too. These guys were, especially Trey Smith, as a sixth rounder. People were saying, I mean, Andy Reid, he's an offensive line guy, like he wants an experienced guy in there. And it's like, if you look at Andy's history, like he will play, he will start rookies on the offensive line if he thinks they can handle it. Jason Kelsey was famously a sixth round, rookie center that
Sure.
played his full rookie season and then went on to have a Hall of Fame career. Like sometimes you just know. And obviously Juwan Taylor is on the pup right now, so the Chiefs are out a tackle. But it's telling that Josh Simmons is getting all these reps with the ones through 2 days, and it's encouraging that he looks as good as he does this early in camp.
I agree 100%. I also think that it's just encouraging from a health perspective, regardless of his ability. I love to hear that he looks strong and he looks good and all that stuff, but they would not be playing him these snaps if they had any concerns about his health, right? I
Right.
mean, regardless of performance, they would just be holding him back, taking it. They always take it careful about stuff like this, and just the fact that they are with a guy like Jalen Moore on the roster that they certainly could have slotted in at left tackle and then done something else over at right tackle. I mean, they had options. They didn't have to play Josh Simmons with the ones here. They did, and so to me, I think I'm a little weary of camp hype in general, just after
Sure.
so many years of being sold a false bag of goods, but that's neither here nor there. So I am most encouraged about the health there, but of course he's a beast, and I mean they said their grade on him was very very high, and the Chiefs have been hyped about the Josh Simmons pick since day one, and this is not doing anything to change that.
No, it's not at all. Speaking of rookie hype, this one is at the opposite end of the spectrum. You've got the first round pick, and then you've got the seventh round rookie running back. Stop me if you've heard it before.
Right?
Brett Veach taking running back in the seventh round, the last round of the draft. This one is rookie running back Rashard Smith, working with the ones. A couple of days into training camp, already getting some reps with the starting offense, and I mean, this is mostly from the fantasy guys. I haven't seen, a ton of quote unquote serious NFL pundits talking up Rashard Smith quite yet. But we've seen some clips of him working out of the backfield, former wide receiver, converted to running back. And, he's looking like Jerick McKinnon out there, like the Chiefs have been missing that element since Jerick McKinnon left the team. They didn't have him last year. We kind of thought maybe break glass in case of emergency. It never materialized. And now you've got Rashard Smith coming in with some receiving chops and with some breakaway speed, which is something that this backfield has sorely lacked. Since Jamal Charles retired, right? Like we talk about it, I feel like almost every year. And that's not to say, Pacheco has good straight line speed if he can get, to the second level. And
if no one's chasing him.
Yeah, right. And he broke off that 40, 50 yard touchdown against the Jets a couple of years ago. We've seen it, but it's just not, a consistent home run threat. And he's not going to take a ball out of the backfield and take it to the house, probably, right?
No.
Like he might break tackle and outrun everybody. But this is an element that the Chiefs offense, again, has lacked really since McKinnon was on the team. Or I guess you could say even going back, Damian Williams, right? Like having a guy that can catch the ball out of the backfield and then take it to the house is something that the Chiefs have not had very often. And it's really intriguing to me that Rashard Smith is showing those chops early on.
I will say it's been a long 365 days since we were doing training camp coverage in 2024. So I forgive you for not remembering. But doesn't this just sound like generic Prince? Doesn't this sound like the same write up? And other than undrafted versus seventh round, but like my worry here is just that. It's this whole like the idea of a player is a lot better than the actual player. And like,
of course,
that's fine. And that we wouldn't be fans if we didn't look at a guy and wonder, what the ceiling would look like. And the ceiling for him is honestly making the 53-man roster. That's a huge win for a seventh round pick. We've talked about that every year. If a seventh round pick, your hit rate on those guys even making the final 53 is not great. So, step one is get him within the top 4 of the running backs on the roster. And then step 2 is get him the ball in the open field and see what he can do. And I do like the converted wide receiver. I think that always makes for an interesting and a dynamic speed element that other kind of bigger running backs don't possess. And, if they can get that guy with some good looks and kind of some nice, easy completions and let him rip one, it would be a lot of fun. I'm probably a little wet blanket here, but I'm just weary about camp hype for guys that we've never seen play NFL football before. It's one thing, if they said, Trav comes in looking 25 pounds heavy or lighter or whatever, like I get it. Like we know, what his worth is on the field already, but we'll see how this one goes.
This is not really news, given his pending discipline from the NFL. Rashee Rice dominating the targets early in camp. I think he had on the first day camp 6 targets and nobody else had more than 2 from Mahomes. So it's probably not super surprising that they're getting the work in, since they may not have a chance to do that once the season starts for a couple of games. But man, Chiefs really missed Rashee Rice last year. And it is so encouraging after the way he went down that he appears to be completely fully healthy and ready to go from a physical standpoint.
Yeah, if you think back to the end of his rookie year, he was doing really well. He was the leading receiver on the team. He was not quite dominating targets, but he certainly was having his fair share. And then, of course, the first 4 games last year where he was leading the NFL in several receiving categories and yards per route run and targets. I think he was top 3 or so in targets or something like that. I mean, he was one of the most targeted and used wide receivers in the NFL for the first 4 games until tragedy struck his right knee in the form of Mahomes' helmet. But I do think they're kind of making up for some lost time. They really haven't, other than their little throw around sessions in the offseason that he's shown up to. He's been rehabbing. So I'm sure Mahomes wants to get him out there and make sure he's still got it before he's taken away from Mahomes for a couple games. But no, it's great to see Rasheed running around and hopefully he's not sidelined too long because they're going to need all the reps they can get.
Yeah, absolutely. So, speaking of the wide receivers, and I know we've talked about this before.
Yes.
Continuing the theme. Yeah, the thing that, we've talked about this before, but like one of the things that's fun about training camp and the preseason to me is that even though we're both huge numbers guys and we love to be able to log on to Pro Football Reference and look up stats and go back and look at a box score and be like, wow, look at this crazy thing that happened. There's something really fun about the totally ephemeral nature of training camp and the preseason. None of this stuff counts. It will never be in a box score. And yet there are moments in time from these football scrimmages, exhibitions, warm-ups, practices that sometimes these moments just stick with you. Of course, Mahomes to Tyreek in Atlanta.
First one I thought of too.
69-yard touchdown, his rookie preseason, obviously. But the Xavier Worthy touchdown from Mahomes, deep touchdown from Mahomes last year in training camp is one of those moments that I remember us talking about on the podcast. It was, the biggest thing that happened in training camp last year. And it was probably the biggest thing that had happened in Chiefs training camp in a couple of years, right? It was just one of those moments that you saw right away proof of concept for how Xavier Worthy could work in the NFL and how he could add to the offense. And they're back at it already. It's not quite as memorable as the touchdown from last training camp, but they are connecting deep. And Hollywood Brown, who we'll talk about when we kind of go back over the roster, who's back on a 1-year deal, he also had a deep targeted catch from Patrick Mahomes. I feel like we say this every year, but like,
what if
is the deep game back? Like,
well, and I'm gonna do a complete 180 from the last take, and the reason that I'm gonna do that is because we haven't seen a fully healthy, several deep threat roster on the Chiefs. We just haven't seen it, and we've been dreaming about it. We've been dreaming about it since Tyreek left, and we've been dreaming about it since they signed idiots like MVS and Tony and all those guys. And we just wanted a couple of wide receivers that can run deep down the field and catch the football. And last year they had Worthy, but that was it. Everyone else around him was just not. I mean, teams could easily take that away from Worthy's game because there wasn't really another guy that could do that. And that's because they didn't have Hollywood. And so I do think that the deep ball is like this white whale of Chiefs offense that for the last 4 years or so, the Chiefs have just been waiting to be able to do it again. Not to, I mean, they want to. They obviously want to. Pat wants to. I think Andy wants to. I don't know if Matt Nagy wants to or if it even matters if he wants to.
Sure.
But
who knows?
No one could know. But the point would be that if Hollywood and Worthy are on the same field and healthy for a significant portion of this year, there's just no way that the deep ball doesn't make a renaissance in this offense. I'm not saying that it's going to be their number one, weapon in their bag or anything like that, but there's just no way it's not going to work way more often than it worked the last several years, which is pretty much they have been statistically the worst deep throwing team in football with Patrick Mahomes at quarterback. That's crazy, and that's because of the wide receivers.
It's crazy that the offense has been as good as it's been, and obviously the last couple of years it has not been nearly as good as it was in the glory
Right.
days of 2018. But it's crazy how good the offense has been despite that being completely absent from the game. And we know that the Chiefs, when they're capable of doing it, obviously it elevates the offense to be able to put that fear in defenses. And we saw it a little bit, not in the Super Bowl, obviously, because the offensive line just didn't show up. What Super
Saw it
Bowl?
late in the Super Bowl when it didn't
Yeah,
matter.
right. Sure, we did. You saw it late in the Super Bowl when
No,
it didn't
I
matter
didn't. I
because
was I was already out of the stadium. I had to
okay,
see it later.
that's fair. I did not see it at the stadium or later because I turned it off in the first half and I didn't turn it back on. So it is what it is. I really hate how we keep getting dragged back
Eh,
into
it's
mentioning
first
this,
show
but it's
since.
it's fine. The point is, yeah, exactly. When we shake the rust off, you'll never hear about that game ever
Never.
again.
No.
If we were in mid-season form right now, wouldn't even have brought it up. The point
Nope.
is that in the playoffs this past season, we saw the impact that Hollywood Brown had when he came back, and that was without Rashee Rice. That was with Travis Kelce having had to be used a lot more in the regular season. The Chiefs wanted to use him in the regular season because of all the injuries that they had at wide receiver. And now you have Xavier Worthy healthy. You have Hollywood Brown healthy. You have Rashee Rice healthy. You have Travis Kelce, hopefully on a pitch count where
Mm-hmm.
when he rolls into the playoffs, he can be playoff Travis Kelce again. Uh, it's very encouraging. It's early, but it's very encouraging to know that it could be back. I'm not saying that it is, but it could be.
Sure.
And we haven't even mentioned the next guy on my list, Jalen Royals, who, by the way, ran a 4.440. He's also pretty fast. He scored a touchdown in red zone work today. And obviously, red zone work, they're already in the red zone, right? The offense hasn't had to do anything to get there.
Training camp is the red zone. Yeah.
It's the second day of training camp, but he catches a touchdown today. And this is a guy that maybe this is because I picked him up in a couple of dynasty leagues. I just drafted him in our listener dynasty league. Felt great about it.
Shout out
And
to those boys, by the way. That's been fun, and will continue to be fun. And
yeah,
we might as well plug. We're going to do the redraft league, obviously, and the cutthroat league. The
of
same,
course, yes.
and it is kind of approaching. We're about a month away from like go time on
Yeah, we need to.
drafts and stuff. So if anyone is listening to this and you are interested in playing fantasy football with us, we have many spots open, several choices to choose from in play styles and all that fun stuff. So get after me on Twitter at Taylor_Witt. Send me a DM. Tell me you want to play fantasy, and we'll get you involved.
I'm actually a little bit disappointed that I brought up fantasy too, because longtime listeners of the show will know that I had an all-time horrible fantasy football playoffs where I was in the semifinals in 3 of our leagues and in the finals in 2 of them and won 0 championships, including having the opportunity to go back-to-back in our 16-team cutthroat league in the first 2 seasons and then getting beaten in the finals. An all-time bad beat. I'm like,
Yeah.
I deleted the sleeper app
Yeah,
and I
you were
didn't
so
reinstall it until you texted me a few weeks ago to say that we were doing our rookie draft in the Dynasty League. But you know what? I'm ready to get hurt again. So
That's right.
it is time. And if you guys are interested, give Taylor a shout. We'll see if we can include you in something. Speaking of hopefully not ready to get hurt again, but looking healthy, Jared
Nice.
Wiley. And man, I remember last training camp when we had Charles on the show and he said somebody in the Chiefs front office had said Travis Kelce who about Jared Wiley.
Shout out Charles Goldman. That was an all-time quote. I loved it so much.
And then, of course, Jared Wiley also gets hurt. You're thinking like, all right, well, Worthy's banged up at various points last year. Rashee went down early. Hollywood Brown was out for almost the entire season. Maybe this guy that's drawing comparisons to, young Travis Kelce, maybe he can step up and we can have a cool, like, 2 tight end kind of attack like the Patriots used to have with the murderer and the guy who's not as good as Travis Kelce. And no, that too was snatched away from us. And you know what? He's back and he's healthy and he looks great. And wouldn't it be cool if that worked out? If Jared Wiley was a thing, wouldn't that be fun?
It would be fun. And I mean, it's not like this team doesn't know how to use tight ends in the offense. They've been, Travis Kelce's the GOAT, but they've been able to use anybody from Demetrius Harris, Noah Gray. I mean, guys will show up in this offense at the tight end position. And so Jared Wiley, if he's healthy, will get opportunities to catch the football. And boy, that would be a nice little passing of the torch, wouldn't it?
Yeah, it would be great. It would be a lot of fun. Can't wait to see what hype trains come out of Chiefs training camp in the next week before we are back at it and podcasting again. But before we wrap up this show, we wanted to go over the offseason transactions. When you take the offseason off, as we did, for, again, very good reasons,
Extremely good.
you miss out on some things. I almost didn't want to admit this, but when you said earlier that Derek Carr retired, I was like, shit, Derek Carr retired?
Yeah.
And I wasn't super present in April when Derek Carr announced his retirement. And I'm actually pretty excited about it. And I'm going to go read up on it when we're done with the podcast. But the point is, you've made an amazing spreadsheet that sort of catalogs all of the major transactions from the offseason. And we're gonna talk through it, see if there's any fun, exciting ads in there that we haven't already talked about that are worth mentioning on the show.
Yeah, exactly. So I'm going to say a group of players, and that group came to the Chiefs in a certain way, and then just get kind of a high level, view of anybody that stands out to you or anything that you find to be interesting in that group. So we're going to start off with the new additions to the roster from free agency. So these are going to be Christian Fulton signed a 2-year deal previously with the Chargers, 2 years, $20 million. That was, probably the most significant one here. But Jalen Moore, also pretty significant, 2-year deal previously with the 49ers, 2 years, $30 million. So actually he's the highest contract here. The rest of them are all 1-year deals. Gardner Minshew, of course, everybody remembers him from the Jags and Raiders. And then Elijah Mitchell, running back from the Niners. Mike Edwards returns to the Chiefs after a brief stint with the Titans. He came back on a 1-year, just a little prove it deal. And then Bob Tonyan, the tight end, very old. He's, I think, 35.
He's actually only 31. I looked this up while you were talking earlier because I saw Bob Tonyan in there, and I was like, that guy's like 1,000 years old.
Yeah.
I remember him catching a Hail Mary from Aaron
at least
Rodgers.
Travis.
And, that's,
well,
Aaron
everybody's caught a Hail Mary from Aaron Rodgers in their careers. But yes, Bob Tonyan, tight end, previously with the Vikings last year. Bailey Zappi, backup quarterback, was last with the Browns. And Jerry Tillery, a defensive tackle that was with the Vikings last year, has kind of bounced around a little bit. So that is the Charger, for sure. That was a big one. So of those players there, the two notable ones, or the most notable ones, are Christian Fulton, Jalen Moore. What are your thoughts on the free agent additions to the team?
I mean, those are obviously the big ones, but honestly, it would be easier for me to pick the guys that I'm not interested in. Mike Edwards is a nice story because he's played with the Chiefs before. Bob Tonyan, Bailey Zappi, Jerry Tillery, whatever. Those are all just kind of 1-year prove-it deals. Maybe, one of those guys. We hope we never see Bailey Zappi, even if he makes the roster.
Correct.
He won't. Jerry Tillery, who knows? Yeah.
I think Tillery's going to make it. I don't think Tonyan and Zappi are going to be on the 53, but I do think Tillery will.
I think he's got a good shot, given where the defensive line is at.
Correct.
and his pedigree, at least. He was a first-round pick of the Chargers. So those guys always get, even if they haven't produced, and he hasn't had an outstanding career from a production standpoint, those guys always get chances, and you always have, there's a guy in every organization that looks at another team's first-round pick. We know Brett Veach loves to do this and says,
yes.
Yeah, it didn't work for the Chargers, but we're the Kansas City Chiefs.
But it might work for us.
We'll make it work. Elijah Mitchell is an interesting one to me because we talked about, running backs who can hit home runs. And Elijah Mitchell, when he was healthy with the 49ers, which was not very often, showed a little bit of that ability. So if
Weird. A 49er not very healthy?
I know, right? A 49er running back. People always get on Kyle Shanahan's case for like drafting like 2 running backs every draft, even though it's the easiest position. But somehow he does. He needs them. They're always getting hurt. Gardner Minshew is fun just from a human interest standpoint because he's a character and he's an interesting guy. And honestly, he's a pretty good backup quarterback.
Agreed. 100%. He's a better plan than freaking idiot Carson Wentz. I mean, that, so that's fine.
Sure. Right. Yeah. And he's, he played for the Raiders last year.
Would love if he started week 18 at Vegas.
Oh,
That'd be a blast.
that would be a lot of fun. And what would be incredible is if he goes out, he beats Vegas like 6 touchdown game, he
Yeah.
pulls like a Mike or a Matt Flynn,
Matt Flynn.
and the Raiders turn
Yeah.
around and say,
Sign him.
"We're going to give that guy $200 million." I
Sure.
mean, we're
Sure.
playing the long game here with Gardner Minshew. Jalen Moore, you know, the 49ers offensive line, aside from Trent Williams, like you never hear anything good about those other guys. Jalen Moore is one of those players that, he got 2 years, $30 million. I'm sure the Chiefs are thinking, we can do something with this guy. And from a physical standpoint, I think there's stuff to work with there. So get him in with Andy and Andy Heck, the two Andys, and let him cook and see what they can come up with. And obviously, it's so funny to look at the history of the Chiefs offensive line in the Mahomes era. You had Eric Fisher and Mitch Schwartz, and set it and forget it. You got two bookend tackles, one of the better tackle situations in the league. And then, those two guys, in the course of one football season are both out of the league, and it's been offensive tackle purgatory ever since. So I don't blame the Chiefs for trying with him. Christian Fulton is on the pup to start training camp, and it's not clear to me when he's going to be healthy or how healthy he's going to be, but I'm really excited about him as a player because he's got, again, this is another player with a great pedigree in terms of his draft stock and everything like that. And we know how good this organization is at developing defensive backs. And if you put a defensive back with any kind of talent at all in front of the Chiefs coaching staff, you're going to get great results out of it. It just is a question of how healthy is he now and how healthy is he going to be by week 1.
That's fair. Do you want to hear my Jalen Moore hot take?
Yeah.
He is going to start in the playoffs for the Chiefs at right tackle. That is my Jalen Moore hot take. I think he's going to overtake Jawan Taylor and end up sitting in there at tackle. So that is our quick rundown on the free agents. And then there was a group of 3 players that signed significant extensions, not 1-year extensions with the Chiefs. We have talked about 2 of them. We've talked about George Karlaftis and Trey Smith. Nick Bolton got a 3-year, $45 million deal back in March. And between those 3 guys, I think Trey Smith is the highest as far as production level for his position, obviously, and he got paid accordingly. But Karlaftis and Bolton are pretty similar in just kind of lunch pail type of,
they are,
show up to work, get the job done. I know everybody has their takes about Nick Bolton and how much they get frustrated by him at times. I get it, man. He's not the fastest linebacker in the world, but he busts his ass. He tries really hard. He's he doesn't do anything wrong specifically. He's just maybe not the most athletic guy in the world. But he can hit really hard. He's a good player. So anyway, those 3 players there. I don't think we need to go into much detail since we have spent pretty significant amount of time certainly on Karlaftis and Smith. But the other guys that signed extensions would include this group: Hollywood Brown. These are all 1-year deals, so they're extensions, but they're re-signing with the team. Hollywood Brown, Chuck Omenihu, Kareem Hunt, Juju Smith-Schuster, Jack Cochran, Nazeeh Johnson, James Winchester, Mike Pennell, Marlon Tuipulotu, Cole Christensen, Mike Caliendo, and Matt Ariza. Other than, Hollywood, I think we've spent quite a bit of time on. Who else in there kind of jumps out to you?
Well, Hollywood does jump out, but yes, we have spent some time talking about him. And honestly, the reason I'm hyped about him this year is the same reason I was hyped about him last year. We just haven't seen it. We haven't gotten to see. I haven't gotten enough Hollywood in my life, and I would like to have more, please. So let's pray he stays healthy. And, I kind of feel the same way about Chuck. Chuck's a great player, and he's had a lot of big moments for the Chiefs. Would you believe that he's only played 17 regular season games for the Chiefs?
I would, because he has spent significant time either hurt or suspended or whatever. Yep. But the strip sack on Lamar in the AFC Championship game. He's had some huge moments.
He has. And, last year he just played 6 regular season games. He only had 1 sack. And then in the playoffs, 3 games, 1 sack. He did have a forced fumble. But I'm excited to see what he can do, healthy and, again, another 1-year contract he's kind of playing for at, an age 28 season. We've seen edge rushers get paid in their late 20s, early 30s. And he has the talent to get, I think, a pretty healthy contract if he balls out for the Chiefs. And we know there's going to be opportunity for him in this edge and frankly also on the interior. There's going to be plenty of space for him in the rotation. He's going to get his opportunities. I would really like to see him earn a big deal, probably from somebody else, but I'd love to see him have a fully healthy year, ball out, and frankly, I would love to see the guy play in and win a Super Bowl as Chief, because he missed the Super Bowl in 2023 after he played such a huge role in getting the Chiefs there with the strip sack on Lamar, towards ACL, and then last year finally getting to play in a Super Bowl. And again, buzz me, ding me. We're gonna put money in a swear jar or whatever. We'll work our way into shape. But anyway, we all know what happened there. I will say briefly on the Nick Bolton thing. Every time you mention people's perceptions of Nick Bolton, I just always think that just kind of really depends on whether you went to school at Missouri or Kansas.
That's fair.
And
the Tigers sure love their Nick Bolton.
Here we are, years removed. And actually, the KU fans are a little bit better about it now. That I feel like they have a more honest perspective now, many years removed from Nick Bolton playing at Mizzou, than they did when he first came out.
As a KU fan, I agree.
Yeah, I think early on, a lot of the Nick Bolton hatred was sort of irrationally driven by college football rivalries and perceptions. The Mizzou fans are still hanging on. I mean, honestly, the biggest Nick Bolton boosters are Missouri fans or alumni, and he's fine. I think we all knew that contract was coming, and it wasn't as bad as I thought it would be. Spags loves him, and he's the quarterback of the defense in a lot of ways, and I don't know how well that contract's going to age since he's not the most athletic guy, but it's also not the end of the world if that contract doesn't pan out. So I think of those, the guy that stands out the most to me is Chuck, and I would love to see Chuck ball out and get a new contract. But really all of these guys, I mean, the first 7 guys you said, Karlaftis, Smith, Bolton, Hollywood, Chuck, Kareem Hunt, and Juju Smith-Schuster, those are all guys that I'm interested in seeing in 2025.
Yep, I think that is fair. Okay, so then real quick, briefly, we haven't super talked about Trent McDuffie. The team on April 29th did exercise his 5th-year option. Of course, we knew they would. That's a $13.6 million deal for 2026. Of course, there's always the franchise tag available to them in 2027 if that comes to that. So the runway on a McDuffie deal is certainly there to be had. It's not pending. It's not anything that is super critical, but they do need to lock up one of the best cornerbacks in the game.
Are they going to? I mean, that would be my question to you.
Brett Veach does a really good job of extending guys that he drafted that are really good.
Yeah, but here's my question, and this is a legitimate question. There may have been reporting on this, and again, we're playing our way into shape. I might have just missed it. So if you don't know, and one of our listeners is listening to the show and does know, feel free to add me on X or whatever. He and Karlaftis were the same draft class, and they extended Karlaftis this offseason, and they didn't extend McDuffie this offseason. And I mean, part of that is, if they're going to pay Trent, it's going to be more money, and I'm sure that plays into when you pay the guy, certainly. But at the same time, because they're going to have to pay him more, they're going to have to pay him even more if they pay him next offseason, because the top of the market cornerback deal is just going to go up. Sauce Gardner just got paid. Patrick Surtain Jr. just got paid. McDuffie is not. I mean, he's right up there with both of those guys. I mean, I think most people think Surtain's the best quarterback in the league right now. Sauce Gardner opinions are maybe a little bit more mixed, but Trent McDuffie's right up there. ESPN's doing a series right now where they're pulling executives around the league for the top 10 players at each position, and McDuffie was 4th, behind those 2 guys and Denzel Ward.
Yes.
I'm surprised that people still think Denzel Ward is one of the 3 best corners in the league. Him. Yeah. But anyway, I I don't know. You think that is
I
their plan, is to pay McDuffie next
I
offseason?
do. I do. I think that the Chiefs have shown a willingness to give their homegrown players money, and they probably knew with McDuffie and Karlaftis both being first round picks, they weren't just in the same draft class, they were both in the same round. And they probably knew that it was going to be hard to squeeze, no matter really what,
Yeah,
how both
two
players
extensions
shook
the
out.
same year.
Two
Yep.
first round talent guys that are still on your team in 5 years, so you know that they're still going to be talented players. I just don't think they could have worked in the books to get both of them. And so they probably, I mean, I don't know anything here, but they probably picked the guy that had the easier contract, which is George Karlaftis. He's not top of market. They can slot him right in. They can say, okay, you know, this is about the player you are. So that means this is going to be how much money we're going to give you. We're going to tack it on to the end of your deal, and you're going to play for $17.5 million for 6 years. And he said, thank God, I am set. I mean, everyone was happy. He wasn't asking for a ton of money. And then on McDuffie's side, like he's going to be a $30 million a year cornerback, no matter who pays him, if it's the Chiefs or not. So he's pretty much looking at, not quite double the Karlaftis contract, but certainly AAV is going to be pretty significant. And I mean, I just think the Chiefs have more incentive to get that deal done next season than they do this one. So, yes, I do think it's going to happen. Let's move on to the draft picks. Just to recap that, we did
Sure.
have a
Yeah.
draft show. But first round pick Josh Simmons, second round pick Omar Norman Lott, who just recently on the 21st did, along with all the other second round picks, get that kind of drama figured out with all their guarantees that they were all negotiating with. I believe I saw that they're all now signed, so all the second round picks, so that's cool. Third round pick Ashton Gelati, fourth round pick Noel Williams, fifth round pick Jalen Royals, two thirds on Gelati and Williams, and then fourth round pick Jalen Royals, fifth round pick Jeffrey Bassa, and then seventh round pick Brashard Smith. We've talked briefly about a couple of those guys. Anything you want to say about the draft class before we move on?
Yeah, actually, I will. Since we hit none of the training camp hype for any of the defensive guys,
Yeah,
I'll say Omar Norman Lott has been getting a lot of first team reps
a
through the
lot.
first 2 days, and looks good. I mean, I think a guy that maybe people were a little bit surprised got taken as high as he did, but I think the Chiefs, when they have talent on the defensive line, like I do trust the Chiefs coaching staff to make the most of the talent they have on the
Sure.
defensive line. I don't know that they've always had the most talent on the defensive line outside of Chris Jones. And
Yeah.
so, they have had to get a little bit creative. But like Treshaun Wharton, for example, a guy who's in your next little things, spoiler alert, obviously went to another team and got paid. But like Treshaun Wharton was a UDFA that the Chiefs turned into a really good player and got a healthy paycheck. Colin Saunders, a mid-round draft pick. The Chiefs got a very good payday on the defensive line. So I think the Chiefs do know what they're doing.
Yeah.
And it sounds like Norman Lott is a big part of their plan. I think they took him with a very specific plan in mind, and we're seeing a lot of first-team reps from him. So, we've already talked about Josh Simmons. We've already talked a little bit about Royals and Smith. But shout out to Omar Norman Lott. Excited to see what he has in store for us.
You know who one of my favorite Chiefs draft picks on the defensive line over the last, couple decades was? He's a player that got a defensive touchdown in the Chiefs' 54-51 loss to the Rams on Monday Night Football. Do you remember who this was? Just based on that, he returned a fumble, rumbled into the end zone for a touchdown. One of 3 defensive touchdowns in that game, which was crazy. Of course,
Yeah, it was crazy.
lot
And
of points scored.
I unfortunately remember the pick six where I don't remember who it was. Some role player for the Rams came through
Dude,
and swatted it and took it to the house.
Man, this guy's name, I always think of him because he had
he had both of the Rams defensive touchdowns that game.
Yes.
Shit. I feel like an idiot for not pulling that. But
I mean, this was 2018. It was 7 years ago. I do not remember who it was on the Chiefs. I can see it in my mind, but I can't see
it. It was Alan Bailey. Alan Bailey
sure,
scored a
of
defensive touchdown, and I just remember I love that dude. I always did.
Yeah, he's a great player.
Samson Ebukam is the player for the Rams who had a pick six and a fumble six.
Yes, Samson.
In that game, and he's still playing. He's a nice player. Okay, so that is the draft class, and then finally, the last group in the little exercise we're doing here are players that are no longer on the Chiefs for one reason or another. We've already talked a little bit about a bit about the Joe Tooney trade. So he's the only player that left via traded to the Chicago Bears and picked up a nice payday for himself. Love Joe Tooney. And then we have the free agent departures. Turk Wharton, just mentioned, he went to the Panthers and signed a 3-year, $45 million deal. The best deal that a Chief signed in free agency. First above Justin Reed, who went to the Saints and signed a 3-year, $31.5 million deal. Also a pretty healthy move for Justin Reed. And like the last two times that Justin Reed changed teams, when he changed teams, Honey Badger immediately left. He did that with the Texans, and he did that with the Chiefs. So Justin Reed just scaring Honey Badger away from NFL rosters left and right. And then Justin Watson signed a 2-year, $5 million deal with the Texans. That's a nice little. I mean, he was wasn't really sure he would play anymore, and the Texans decided to give him 2. Samaje Perine with the Bengals, back to the Bengals, 2 years, $3.6 million there. Spencer Schrader, the kicker, is actually on the Colts roster for the next 2 years for $2.5 million. I actually don't think he's going to be their main kicker, but they gave him a 2-year deal. So, good for Spencer Schrader. Josh Uche is back with the team that shall not be named on a 1-year, $2 million deal. And then Keith Taylor, the cornerback, to the Falcons. Derek Nottie to the Jets on only a $1.4 million 1-year deal, which I thought Derek Nottie was a better player than that. I actually I think he's one of the more significant free agent losses. He was always really good. And then McCole Hardman did land with the Packers. This was news to me when I was putting the spreadsheet together, but he has signed a $1.5 million deal with the Green Bay Packers. DJ Humphries, what could have been with the DJ Humphries signing. He went over to the Rams on a 1-year, $2.5 million deal. Nook Hopkins is a Raven, 1-year, $5 million deal to go play in Baltimore. And then 3 free agents that have not found a new landing spot. Previously mentioned idiot Carson Wentz. Nothing, I guess, against him, but boy, he was really bad when we saw him. He left in free agency, and then Jody Fortson and Peyton Hendershot, 2 tight ends that do not have a team yet. And then finally, Justin Ross was cut on July 16th, and BJ Thompson was placed on the reserve non-football injury list from his seizure, and the team is going to continue to, take care of his medical operations as much as they can. So he's not technically on, I guess non-football injury list, you can call it roster or not. But that is the group of players that were Chiefs in 2024 and not going to be Chiefs in 2025. Your thoughts?
I have a couple of thoughts. First of all, I just want to say again, good on Turk Wharton, an undrafted free agent making $45 million.
Pretty sweet.
On his first non-rookie contract is incredible and a huge testament to both the Chiefs for developing him and to Turk himself for playing his ass off and getting a huge payday. Generational, life-changing money for him and his family. That's awesome to see. The second part of it, what you said for DJ Humphries applies to a lot of guys on this list, which is what could have been.
Nook Hopkins.
Nook Hopkins, DJ Humphries,
Josh Uche. Yeah, for sure.
Who the Chiefs traded for.
Yeah.
There just were
Justin
a lot of
Ross.
guys. Yeah, Justin Ross. There's just a lot of guys on this list. BJ Thompson still has a shot, and obviously that's just a tough situation with his health. Hopefully he'll be able to come back healthy and prove that he belongs in the NFL, because he was, he was showing some good stuff before he had that seizure and, had to go through what he's been going through. But a lot of these guys, Jody Fortson, if you want to go back to the training camp hype trains of years past, but specifically Uche, Humphrey, and Hopkins from last year's Chiefs team that made it as far as it did. Those were all mid-season additions that if you play out the 2024 season 1,000 times, there's at least a couple dozen scenarios where a couple of those guys hit, and I mean really hit, because Luke Hopkins had his moments. Josh Uche and DJ Humphries almost literally didn't even appear on the field for the Chiefs in their limited time with the team. But there's at least a couple of dozen alternate universes where some of those signings hit. They roll boxcars and maybe this season ends differently. And it probably doesn't, because obviously
I don't know what you're talking about.
Exactly. But what could have been, right? What could have been? So that I don't know that I'm going to miss any of these guys. I mean, we talked about Tooney, obviously, great player. Tershawn Wharton, a really good player. Justin Reed certainly had his moments. But the rest of these guys on this list, it's kind of like, well, I wish them well, but I wish, except for Samaje Perine. I actually don't wish Samaje Perine. Now, he did have, the game-winning touch against the Broncos.
Yeah.
And that
anyone could have done that.
And well, sure, anyone could have done it, but Samaje Perine did do it. On the other hand, this is like strike three for Samaje Perine. He was a Bengal, and he killed the Chiefs when he was a Bengal. He was a Bronco. Then he comes to the Chiefs. They don't win the big one, and then he goes back to the Bengals. He voluntarily chose to go back to Cincinnati. Yeah, he's excommunicado for sure. See ya.